Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fifth TMA virtual legislative briefing of 2023, where we'll be discussing the estate tax reform proposal being considered in the Illinois Senate, the latest with the small and mid-sized manufacturing caucus, and potential legislation that might be considered in next week's veto session in Springfield. My name is Rich Carter. I'm TMA's government affairs consultant, and I'll be the moderator for today's briefing. We're joined by TMA state lobbyist David Curtin, as well as a very special guest, Assistant Senate Majority Leader Dave Koehler of Peoria. Good morning, David and Senator Koehler.
Morning. Thanks.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Well, thanks for being here, gentlemen. We're gonna spend the next half hour discussing potential legislative action in the Illinois Senate, the estate tax reform bill Senator Koehler has introduced, and its prospects for passage, and what's on the horizon for the small and mid-sized manufacturing caucus next legislative session. At the end of the program, TMA members will have an opportunity to ask written questions of Senator Koehler by typing them into the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. Now I'll turn it over to TMA state lobbyist David Curtin. We'll introduce our special guest and get his thoughts on the upcoming veto session and next year's legislative session. Floor is yours, David.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Senator Koehler, for being here today. Our TMA member companies are tuning in live for this podcast, and I know I have a familiar sight behind me for you.
I recognize that.
That's the Senate chambers where you are the Assistant Majority Leader of the Illinois State Senate in Springfield. You're a Peoria area Democrat who has served in various public positions. Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and your interest in public service?
Yes, well, I actually am not a native Illinoisan. I grew up in South Dakota. My father was a ordained minister with United Church of Christ, and so I was a PK, a preacher's kid. So we moved around from different communities in South Dakota. I followed his footsteps. Actually went to seminary after college in Dayton, Ohio. And I too am an ordained minister with United Church of Christ. When I was in seminary, I was recruited to work for the National Farm Worker Ministry. So I went to work for 6 years for Cesar Chavez in the United Farm Workers Union. And so I spent that period of time all across the country doing various jobs. Met my wife in Cleveland, and we've been, we're going on 48 years now. So we came to Peoria in 1978. I got a job at Peoria Friendship House. They were looking for an ordained minister, community organizer. So I seemed to fit the bill, and we thought, Peoria is a good place. We'll be here a couple of years, and so it's been over 45 years now, and we just love it. We've raised our family here. We've got 4 grandkids that are all here in Peoria, and I guess that's really where I got my start politically. I was on the county board, elected first in 1982. Served 6 years on the Peoria County Board, and then went to Peoria City Council for 8 years. Those are both legislative bodies in a sense, and I enjoyed that work. When Senator George Shadid, I worked with him for a time being, and when he decided to retire, he asked me if I would be interested in running, and I said I was. And so in 2006, I was elected to the Illinois Senate, and I've been there ever since, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. One other piece of history is that after I served at Friendship House for about 7-8 years, I became the first executive director of the Peoria Area Labor Management Council, which was an organization that was funded by both the Chamber of Commerce and labor groups to help promote labor peace. Caterpillar, UAW, all kinds of unions and companies, both public sector and private sector. And so we developed a plan really to help foster better relations between labor and management in the context of collective bargaining. So that's what I did right before I came to the Senate.
Very interesting. Well, as a member of the Senate Majority's leadership, you have a position that carries with it a great responsibility. What can you share with our members about your hopes and dreams for small and mid-sized manufacturing in Illinois?
Well, I think that's really the kind of the backbone of our economy here. I mean, we've kind of got 2 tracks in Illinois. One is I've come to really appreciate agriculture as our biggest and most important industry. Now, manufacturing fits into that as well because, as we know, I was just on a combine last week with a farmer going through the fields harvesting the corn, and so I know that manufacturing plays a big role in terms of just helping agriculture in terms of all that they do. But we also have industries that Peoria, Caterpillar, Bloomington Normal now with the Rivian plant. There's large companies, but smaller companies really help to feed into to what they produce. And I think that the role for small manufacturing is really exciting, because that's where a lot of the creativity comes. That's where a lot of the new technology is employed, and small companies seem to really do that well.
Yeah. Well, and many members here are a part of that, and many members of ours know that you are participating in a bipartisan legislative caucus that put together by TMA to work on small and mid-sized manufacturing issues. We affectionately call it the Sam's Club, because SAM stands for small and mid-sized manufacturers. But what can you tell our members who are watching this about this bipartisan caucus, how important it is, how helpful it is to you as a legislator in Springfield when you deal with issues that directly affect small and mid-sized manufacturers?
Well, I think it's a good opportunity for us to come together in a bipartisan way. And when I do bills in my life as a legislator, I always look for opportunities to make them bipartisan bills, because I think that's better legislation. If you have more input from people that have different perspectives and different geographic locations within Illinois, it always becomes, I think, a better piece of legislation. This is a way that we can kind of share as colleagues different things that are going on in our area. Yes, Peoria may be very similar to Rockford, or may be very similar to other parts of the state, but there's also some differences, and we need to know what those are, and we need to know how it fits in. The Chicago and the suburban areas surrounding Chicago may be a little different than what we experience here downstate, but there's also a lot of similarities in ways that we can support each other.
Good. Well, you've put together and filed legislation, just to get into the meat of it a little bit, some legislation that would raise the estate tax exemption from $4 million to $12 million. Can you explain this legislation, and what are the chances of it passing next year in the Illinois General Assembly?
Well, I wish I knew that. What the chances are. We're certainly going to make an attempt at this, but I think it's a good, sound piece of legislation. I've gotten a lot of bipartisan support on that already. Initially, I did it, I think, with the idea in mind that we have really, our small family farms are at risk right now in Illinois. A $4 million farm anymore, because of land prices, is not a big farm. And when you see families that the original owner of the land dies and passes it on to their heirs, when they have to sell that just to pay the taxes, it means usually that corporations come in and buy it up. And so we're going to risk losing the family farm aspect of Illinois. I think that's very important, because family farms are still, it may not be so true in California, where I once worked, but in Illinois, family farms are still kind of the backbone of agriculture. And we need to preserve and protect that. It does also, filter over into other areas too, because, and I've talked to people who have been advised by their financial advisors that when you get ready to retire and you're thinking about your legacy to your kids, move out of state. Don't pay those high estate taxes here. So I think that for us to look at least matching what the federal government allows for an exemption on that would make sense. If push comes to shove, I suppose that I would probably want to look at least trying to carve out agriculture and doing something there. I don't know what kind of resistance we're going to run into. I mean, always when you get into issues of revenue and expenditures, you have to look at the whole picture. So if we're talking about giving a break in this area, that means there's less money for something else. And so that all has to be done in the negotiation around budget time. But I think this is an important statement for us to make as a state, to say we value these kind of investments and this kind of legacy that families bring to Illinois.
Yeah, and a lot of our companies are family companies that have been here for 2, 3
Right.
generations, and they've been very excited about your legislation.
Yeah, same issue.
It's but it ties the state rate to the federal rate. Is that right? Federal rate is already at 12.
That's yes. It is 12 plus, but that's what the initial legislation is. As we know, when legislation is proposed, what comes out in the end may be something very different. So we'll have to see what the negotiation process is on that, and so I can't guarantee anything at this point of what it's going to look like when the sausage comes out of the other end. It may be something very different, but we're gonna make an attempt.
Okay. Well, legislators are coming back to Springfield actually next week for veto session. It runs for 6 days. Can you share with our members a little bit about what they might be able to expect in anything that's of interest to them in the veto session? Whether
in terms of small manufacturers, I'm not sure there's anything of particular interest. The governor, I think, vetoed about 5 or 6 bills. I'm not sure we're going to have enough support to overriding those. The 2 big ones that stand out were the lifting the moratorium on nuclear energy. I was a chief co-sponsor of that bill. Senator Resin sponsored the bill, and that was something that was done, quite frankly, with looking at small modular reactors, the SMRs. So the nuclear power and industries are changing. We're not building any of the big plants anymore. Those were so burdensome in terms of cost and time, and they just don't work anymore. But what is coming now, and the U.S. Department of Energy is really pushing this, are the small modular reactors, where they are built inside of a factory. Each capsule can produce about 77 megawatts of power. You put these in a series, you can put them in 6, 8, 10, 12 these capsules, and you can ramp them up and ramp them down, which is really exciting, because a nuclear power plant, you just turn the switch on and it produces power. You can't modify that. So that's really the signal we wanted to send to that industry, is that Illinois is ready for business. And what it really relates to is that you could set up a microgrid within part of Illinois and have this small modular reactor feed that microgrid. You could use it as a peaker plant. You could really I think these things are probably still another 5-10 years away from being employed, but the benefit of producing carbon-free, reliable electricity is really valuable to us, and it's valuable to your members as well, because you need to rely upon a good source of clean, cheap power.
Yeah, Senate Bill 1556. Did you want to?
Yes, I do. Let me just mention one other thing was the Ameren had a bill that gave them the right of first refusal in terms of transmission lines. That one was a controversial one. I'm not sure either of these are going to be overridden in veto session. The bill that I'm working on, I'm spending most of my time on right now, is called the Clean Fuel Standard Bill for Illinois. It's or you can call it the Low Carbon Fuel Standard Bill. It's Senate Bill 1556. What it does is it really creates a carbon market for Illinois. Other states are engaged in the process of doing this. Some have done it. California, Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, New York. So Illinois, we're trying to establish a way that we can help reward people that do the right thing, who are involved in some kind of a sustainable activity. And that creates a credit, and that credit can be sold to a bank, and others who say are polluters have to buy those credits, and that helps to balance the system. I've really been pitching this to agricultural interests, because what we're trying to construct now is a financial economic framework for how we can actually achieve our goals of having less carbon in our atmosphere, because we know, I mean, just look at last year with all the weather problems that we had across the world. So this helps to create a way that people can economically benefit by doing the right kind of sustainable activities. For farmers, what it means is that if you're doing no-till, if you're doing things that, first of all, farmers are producing biofuels, which are sustainable fuels. The industry is going to change, I think, from ethanol from cars, because cars are going electrification. We know that in the next 10, 15 years. So ethanol is really still going to have a market because of sustainable aviation fuel. And that's really kind of where I see the industry going. So by giving farmers some rewards for doing the right kind of thing, maybe it's creating in your drain tile system retention ponds to be able to filter out phosphates and nitrates, so we don't have to put them into our water systems. For manufacturers, it could be that you're looking at sustainable activities within your particular plant or your operation, and how does that relate to creating a credit for you? Argonne Labs has created what they call the GREET system, GREET, and this system gives a value to all the different sustainable activities as to what that value is compared with other values. And that's kind of the standard platform for how all this works. I think it's going to be exciting. I think it again gives the incentive to not only do the right thing, but do the right thing because it helps your bottom line. And I think that if we're going to ever be serious about decarbonizing our environment, we have to put in place the financial structure to make it work.
Okay, well, thank you. At this time, we'll turn it back over to Rich. While we've been talking, our members have been typing in questions in the chat box. So, Rich, you want to take it?
Definitely. Thanks, David. Now it's time for questions and answers with TMA members. And for those of you on your computers, or if you're using the mobile app, you can type your question and submit it through the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. I'll read the questions and ask Senator Koehler to respond. In the meantime, I'll ask Senator Koehler the first question that was pre-submitted by a TMA member. The question is, Senator Koehler, we appreciate your work on the estate tax. That's important. But our biggest concern right now is trying to find skilled workers. Can the state of Illinois do anything to help us find employees? Senator?
Yeah, I think we are. And I think that our community college system is probably the best place for us to really pursue that, because and I've got two community colleges in my district here, Illinois Central College and then Heartland Community College in Bloomington Normal. Those colleges are very tuned in to what the local needs of manufacturers are. So for instance, here in Peoria, ICC works directly with Caterpillar, with Komatsu, with other larger manufacturers and smaller manufacturers to say, okay, what kind of skills do you need? What kind of incentives? I visited their program where they're training mechanics at ICC. These students have already been hired by companies, and now they're being trained, and it's being paid for by the companies, and they will go back to work as skilled technicians to be able to do that work. So, as your members know, it's a very different game now. You have to be very intentional and very aggressive in terms of getting the kind of employees you want, because I always think of the example when I was on the city council years ago, when the fire department had a time to test for firefighter exams. You'd have several hundred people show up and put their application in. Today, they're lucky if they get 5 or 6, and so it's a different world. And if you want to get employees, you have to be intentional as to who you want. It has to start at an earlier age. There's now programs that are being done in grade school levels, in high school levels, There's a funnel of trying to get people from high school. I think that's a wonderful program of having dual credits for high school students to work with community colleges to be able to really graduate from and get your associate's degree at the same time you're working on your high school diploma. But I think that's the key for us is education and training.
Great, thanks, Senator. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please type your question on the Q&A tab on the Zoom control panel. All right, we have a question from a TMA member. This is more political in nature. It says, bipartisanship is a great word, but when one party has supermajorities in both chambers and controls all the executive offices, they don't really need the other party for anything. As a leader in the supermajority party, do you think it's important to work with legislators in the other party, and why?
Oh,
Senator?
absolutely. Yeah, it would be a big mistake for us to ever take the attitude that we can just do it alone. That's the wrong way to do government. And I'll use the example of this last year during our budget negotiations. We really worked hard to include Leader John Curran, leader of the Republican Senate members, into those budget discussions. And there was ever any attempt to force, to have them excluded from that. Now, some didn't vote for everything, but that's okay. Their input was still gathered. I always look for bipartisan support whenever I do legislation, just because I think it makes it a better piece of legislation, and it's more credible to people when they see that. So yeah, I don't buy that has been our attitude. I think it's been actually the reverse. It doesn't matter whether we're a supermajority or not. We still need to have that input in that relationship.
Great, thanks, Senator. All right, we have another question from a TMA member. This one is about an issue, the Biometric Information Privacy Act, which has been in the news amongst our members. It says, Senator, we're hearing more and more about business owners in Illinois getting snared in BIPA lawsuits, including some of our own TMA members. The way the law is written right now will put many of them out of business. Are legislators doing anything to try to fix this? Senator?
Yes, yeah, this is a big issue, and I think it was there's all kinds of unintended consequences that have happened because of that, and so we need to get back on that. It's still somewhat controversial because there are proponents of that that say that this is the way it should work. I'm not in that camp. I think that we should make some modifications so that we don't ding companies for doing things that really I don't think threaten the privacy of an individual. And there's all kinds of examples out there. The White Castle example probably stands out as the most egregious, but we need to make some changes in that.
Great, thanks, Senator. All right, I think we don't have any more questions. We're probably near the end. So, Senator, do you have any closing thoughts for TMA members?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be involved in SAM, which David explained. It's a good chance for us to look at the needs of a specific industry. Sometimes we try to be too much a generalist in terms of how we approach things. I think we need to get specific, and I think we need to look at really what the opportunities and what the obstacles are for small manufacturers, because again, that's where our economic backbone is in our communities. I mean, it's the jobs that are created. It's small business that creates most of the jobs in this country. And so I just look forward to learning more and to being an ally in that cause. So thank you for this.
Well, thanks, Senator. Well, that will do it for today's virtual briefing with Senator Koehler. Thanks for joining us, along with TMA State Lobbyist David Curtin, who always leads a wonderful discussion. And of course, we want to thank all of our TMA members who took time out of their day to join us today. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. Goodbye.